It is your Tuesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to have you guys back for another day. Good show coming up as usual. Chris Preston from Preston Spire advertising agency in Minneapolis will join me here in just a little bit to talk about Super Bowl advertising. A lot of what you saw on Sunday outside of the game, of course, which was very good. And we talked about that a lot on Monday. He'll help me kind of break down what was good about it, what was bad about it, the history of kind of the importance of Super Bowl ads when that became such a thing. And so really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you do as well. A little something different on the show, but a good time for it. And like I said, I hope you enjoy that. I've got a Justin Jefferson and Anthony Edwards thought at the end of the show that I'll get to. First, though, what did I miss? Going to be a little game heavy at the jump, and how the tables have turned. The turns have tabled, as I like to say. One game into the Mike Conley Jr. for D'Angelo Russell trade, and yes, there's more components to it. The Wolves got 3 second-round draft picks out of it. They got a salary spot for next year, and they got a player, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who probably not going to play much, but they got more than that. But anyway, the principles in the deal, Mike Conley Jr. and D'Angelo Russell. Game 1 for both of them. The Wolves got blown out by Memphis. I think it was like a 21-point loss. Conley was fine, but didn't really have much of an impact. And then D'Angelo Russell played pretty well for the Lakers in a win over Golden State. Now, fast forward to Monday night. Wolves at Dallas. Tough test for them. And the Lakers playing Portland, which is a team that's kind of on the fringe of the playoff race. So you're thinking maybe the Lakers, even without LeBron, can get another one and kind of continue those good vibrations that they had going with D'Angelo Russell in the first game. Well, I'm not going to do this every day. Not going to go game by game with this trade, but the Mike Conley Jr. era got off to a much better start in Game 2. He was quite good. Unlocked Rudy Gobert to a large degree in this game. He was, he helped Rudy Gobert have a perfect shooting night. Rudy Gobert, 9 of 9 from the field for the Wolves, and very effective in this game. He finishes with 21 points, 14 rebounds, 30 minutes. Now, he did not play in the final 7 minutes. The Mavericks went small, spread the Wolves out. Chris Finch thought he would come back to Gobert with a few minutes left, but he never did. The Mavericks kind of stayed with that lineup, and they were chipping away at a Wolves lead that was once 26 points. But the Wolves did hold on for a 124-121 win. Key at the end. A few things, but the biggest thing was the final possession when Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels combined to very much lock down Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, the recently acquired Kyrie Irving for the Mavericks. So the Wolves get the win. Conley 4 of 8 from the field in 32 minutes, including 3 of 6 from three-point range. He missed a free throw late that could have cost the Wolves, but that's not an effort thing. That's just kind of happens. Finished with 12 points, 9 assists, only 2 turnovers, a +6 in the game. Like I said, very effective, very steady. The Wolves score 124 points. The offense runs quite efficiently with him. Now, again, Gobert's not going to go 9 of 9 every game. Jaden McDaniels isn't going to go 7 of 8 every game, but a good sign for the Wolves that they could put up those kind of numbers. Anthony Edwards leading the way like he usually does, 32 points, 5 rebounds in the game. Not handling the ball quite as much with Conley in the mix, but I think that's okay. I think you can kind of go pick your spots where you've got point and spots where you're going to go with more of a traditional setup, and that's kind of what they had last night. And Kyle Anderson was huge for them, by the way, in the fourth quarter. Maybe a good indicator of how plus-minus does not tell the story usually, or always at least in the game. He was a -15, worst of anybody on the team. But he was a closer down the stretch and really kept them in it when nothing else was really working for them in the fourth quarter. So kudos to Kyle Anderson. And again, that stood in contrast. The Lakers lost to the Blazers. They got blown out pretty much. They made it a little closer late, but D'Lo was fine. I think he had like 16 points. He was fine in that game, but nothing special. And if Lakers fans were having these kind of big dreams of, hey, maybe they can hold down the fort even while LeBron is out, because now we've got D'Angelo Russell. Now we've got, made these depth moves to get, reunite last year's Timberwolves with Russell, with Malik Beasley, with Jared Vanderbilt. Again, all players that I like and think they can contribute to a certain degree. That just wasn't happening on Monday night for the Lakers. So, again, good win for the Wolves, an important win because the Mavericks are right behind them in the standings. I'm sorry, right in front of them still in the standings. Those two teams are very close right now. The NBA, the Western Conference, just completely packed as it has been for a long time now. The Wolves, you just kind of go, basically 4 through 11, 4 through 12 in the West right now, separated by 3 games. The Wolves currently tied for 7th with the Pelicans, technically in 8th because the Pelicans have 1 fewer win, 1 fewer loss, but everybody's just bunched so tight. It's going to be a fight down the stretch. All these games are going to matter. You could not afford to lose that game last night, especially after having such a big lead. So, good win for the Wolves. We'll see if they can build on that as they go forward and get some more of that good kind of chemistry between Mike Conley Jr. and Rudy Gobert. Now, the Wild kind of it's been just such a struggle for them lately to score. And we've talked about it plenty. We have identified a lot of the reasons. But again, in last night's game, they get a point at least, but it's 1-1 again at the end of regulation. It was 2-2 at the end of regulation the other night. I feel like they're really kind of circling things, kind of tightening up as they try to win games now, understanding that they're having a hard time scoring 5-on-5, but also playing a style that's not necessarily conducive to 5-on-5 scoring. And it's just not a really scintillating style of hockey right now. I know that the most important thing is to regroup, to kind of get their bearings, to get some points along the way as they kind of refind their footing. But it's not a really great brand of hockey to watch right now. I mean, some of it last night was the goaltending was good, and Philippe Gustafsson was very good. Starting to wonder if he's developing into a guy that Dean Evison trusts a little bit more, maybe not more yet than Fleury, than Marc-Andre Fleury, but that's an interesting thing to watch going forward. But just right now, just watching the Wild, I'm having a hard time getting into them right now. Last year's team was so much more fun to watch, and again, what wins or getting points, it's important. Wins are more important than style points, of course. But watching this team right now, it's a little bit of a hard watch right now. I'd love to see them figure this out to the point where they can play defense, but they can also regain that scoring touch at least to a certain degree, where it's not this kind of boring, bland style of hockey. So I'm going to watch that going forward as well.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
All right, I am very happy to be joined right now by Chris Preston. He's a partner and chief creative officer at Preston Spire. That is a very successful Minneapolis-based advertising agency, one of the best around that you will find. Chris has been at this for 40 years. I'm sure he doesn't love me saying that, I'm sure, but that gives you an idea of how long he's been at this and what kind of expertise he brings to our discussion today about Super Bowl ads and kind of not just what you saw Sunday, but some of the history of it as well. Chris, welcome. How you doing?
Thanks, Michael. Doing great this morning. It's the Super Bowl of advertising, as they say. So excited. We just had a great all-agency meeting here at Preston Spire and talked about the Super Bowl advertising of last night. So it's a big deal in our world.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, it's not just the game. And, a lot of people, I would guess, you hear people say, hey, I'm just watching for the ads. Not everybody who watches the Super Bowl is super into football. People want to see the halftime show. People want to see the new ads that are coming out. And that's a reason to stay with the game, even if it's not close. And obviously, Sundays was a good competitive game. But even on a blowout, you're going to stick around for, some of these new spots. So I want to get into some of the history in a little bit, but I'd love to just ask you right off the jump, what did you see that you especially liked Sunday night from whatever brands were putting forth their best effort?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a very subjective one. So bear with me. Keep in mind that I'm a creative director, not a brand manager or somebody who's all about the numbers and the way that they move the scale. But we I sent out a survey to our creative department last night, and in various stages of inebriation, I got a bunch of great responses from people. But I'd say, as a cynical ad guy, I'm not supposed to get touched by marketing, but that the farmer's dog pet food brand, which I wasn't aware of actually before the Super Bowl, was very touching for me. I actually got choked up. Maybe because I had a chocolate lab as my last dog, who died 11 years ago. But that touching emotional connection, I think, is really the way that a brand wins in the Super Bowl like this. And probably the opposite end of that scale, I would say the Tubi rabbit hole spot was weird. Not just for weird sake, but with the consumer, I thought they had an insight of that joy of going down the rabbit hole on a streaming service. They captured that in an odd way, throwing people down the rabbit hole. And then their gag that they did, where it looked like somebody sat on the remote control. I don't know if you've noticed that spot, Michael. But,
oh yeah.
Okay. It was, my wife said, "What are you doing when that win?" Because I typically put my foot on the remote or something.
Right.
So I think that was a good interruption. I did have two of the women in our department say they felt people would be annoyed by that, and so they did not like that. But I found it effective.
I noticed that right away. I thought I could tell that it was a spot, that it was something was different from my screen, even though they brought back the two announcers. It was like they were coming back from a commercial break. So it was a good setup. I guess maybe I wasn't fooled. Luckily, I wasn't like, and my son, my 3-year-old son did turn off the TV at one point. I was like, "What are you doing?" Like that was real. That was real, not the Tubi spot. And the dog commercial that you referenced, that one got me too, because we're actually in the process of maybe getting a dog right now. And I've been thinking about, my oldest daughter is 8. I've been thinking about like, wow, like this dog could be part of her life, until she goes off to college, things like that. I'm like, wow, like that's a long time. So that got me right here in the heart too, as I was kind of thinking and watching that one. Your agency prides itself on kind of the concept of good wins. And I imagine the Super Bowl, there's no more kind of pressure to deliver that. How does that kind of get magnified when you're talking about $6-7 million for a 30-second spot where you've got to kind of capture someone's attention, and if you fail, it's the opposite, right?
Yeah, well, good wins, and the thinking behind good wins at our agency is that work has to be really welcome in people's lives. If you're going to do it, there's too many ways to avoid advertising now if people don't like what you're telling them. And so that goes double for the Super Bowl. I think I really do, where your ad might literally appear at a party. So you want to be invited to the party. You want to be welcome at the party. You got to be entertaining. You can't wear your marketing on your sleeve. You have to be welcome in their lives and touch them in a way that an amazing pass play downfield does, or they're sitting in front of a plate of nachos. They don't want to hear your marketing spiel. They want to be entertained. It has to be relevant to society right now. Timing is all important. A lot of things have to go right especially these days, for a Super Bowl spot to succeed.
No, I would imagine that's true. And I guess the flip side of that is, were there offerings Sunday that you thought maybe missed the mark, when not necessarily, they don't have to be like complete flops or failures, but just ones that you were like, that one didn't get me the way that I think they wanted it to get me?
Yeah, I've got a few. I thought the beer marketing in general which is usually a top category for me, was a weak category this year. And I did like Bud Light.
I like that one too.
I thought the on hold was a human truth, and the couple, Miles Teller and his wife were very charming together, very authentic. But I felt like, and I don't know if this is universal or not, a couple people in my department did not like it, but I found first of all, the Miller Coors Light versus Miller Lite bar fight, where Blue Moon comes in at the end, and it's like, some people here didn't know that Miller Coors owned all three brands. They thought, what? It just felt like a big mess. And I think it was a big who cares. And I think consumers will say who cares at the end of that spot as well. So that was a miss for me. I know women are 40% of the Super Bowl audience, so it's fabulous to have brands that appeal to women. Make a big splash. The NFL, I thought, nailed it with their flag football spot. I thought that was very effective and good. But the worst in my mind was the Temu "Shop Like a Billionaire."
Yeah, that's strange
song. It's disposable fashion is, I don't know, maybe that's a personal dislike of mine. I pet peeve. I don't care for disposable fashion, but I don't know how many billionaires are buying $4.99 blouses on an app. So
sure.
it felt like a miss, and I double checked with the women in our agency, and it was hate it was seemed to be the universal theme. Not to be mean, it's not easy. And then I found the Michelob Caddyshack ad to be a miss, and I found it soulless. I felt like it was an attempt, and I thought a somewhat cynical attempt to capture nostalgia. It's obviously a beloved movie,
right?
I suspect with anybody who likes sports or
sure.
Golf, and just hilarious. But replacing like world-class comedians with world-class athletes in a comedy situation just felt like a miss to me. And I love Serena Williams, but she's not a comedian. She just isn't. And I would have rather seen Bill Murray or I guess I can't see Ted Knight or Rodney Dangerfield now, but maybe I would have rather seen the dead guys than
right.
just see
holograms.
Exactly, people trying to be funny that aren't. So that felt like a miss. And then I guess I would say the DraftKings, in your neck of the woods with the sports, the sports betting
right.
and so forth. I felt like that was a huge waste of star talent with Kevin Hart, who I really like, with Big Papi, with Ludacris, and then Hawk. Is just bad wordplay. Tony Hawk, is an amazing athlete, and they just use him as a dumb, word gag. Just felt like unredeemed stuff. So,
yeah, the Bud Light commercial you referenced, I thought that was interesting because I found myself watching it and liking it, but almost in the moment also thinking that it could have been really bad if the chemistry between the man and the woman was bad. Like if it was just two actors, or if they tried to force some kind of chemistry or it didn't seem authentic, that could have been a really bad situation. So that kind of strikes to me, or brings home to me, how important just the nuance of a commercial is, and not just it's so much in the execution and not just the idea sometimes.
It is very much so. And I was ready to love. I felt like that was based on a universal truth, and I was ready to love Kia's Binky spot, because as a dad, as a dad, I actually paid like $100 to have Stripey the cat mailed to me from a foreign country.
Oh my gosh!
Father left Stripey in the hotel room, so I think that one was based on a universal truth, but they took it too far, and it took away from the authenticity of it in my mind.
Good point.
It was funny, but it just wasn't a top spot, because it didn't ultimately ring that authentic button, the good wins button for me as an agency head.
When, I feel like we've been watching commercials for a long time. I'm 46. I've kind of grown up with a lot of this in my lifetime, but maybe we can talk a little bit about the evolution and history of Super Bowl spots, because obviously things have changed dramatically. A lot of these come out even before the Super Bowl is out. They get leaked or released, on snippets or social media, or however it's released. And obviously that was never a thing, 20, 30 years ago. That just wasn't part of the culture. Usually maybe it was promoted to people who might be reviewing it, but not to a general audience ahead of time. How have these evolved over the years, in whether in terms of importance, whether in terms of stature, whether in terms of how they're even produced, from kind of then until now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Michael. I think they said last year 100 million viewings happened by Friday before the
Wow.
Super Bowl. So the extent the media buy is very expensive, but you get a lot of value ahead of time and behind the time, like us talking about it today. But that's certainly what hasn't always been the case with Super Bowl advertising. A lot of brands would just put their best spot, that had been working during the season on the end of the game. And I think, there are a lot of brands that have had home runs through the years, through the decades. But I think that original Coke classic Mean Joe Green ad, and I'm dating myself. I'm older than you are, so I remember the Mean Joe Green spot with the "Hey kid, catch Mean Joe Green,"
Right.
tosses him the jersey after slamming the kid's Coke, and that one still gets incredibly high ratings. That storytelling, that story voice. I have a love for storytelling in that way. But I think the one change that I've seen that's very that idea of spreading out your buy and your impact over more time has made ads, I feel like, a little too self-referential and sometimes a little too inside baseball.
Yeah.
Marketing done for marketing people as opposed to a consumer audience. And I felt like M&M's got caught up in their laundry, their inside baseball laundry this year, where they had to be up on the news to understand that their M&M spokes characters were perceived as overly woke by right-wing media. They
Right.
pretended to kill off their characters and bring in Maya Rudolph as a replacement, and then Maya had these odd clam flavored M&Ms. The M&Ms were really back at the end. I mean, they got tons of media coverage, but I think they missed their 30-second opportunity. There's a lot of head scratching and with my department that didn't know all that media background on it. So that was a miss. But anyway, self-referential, trying to, I think, outstar the other stars. I think if you read research, 25%, if you having a star in your ad gives you 25% more, connectivity the next day. And obviously somebody with 200 million or 2 million Twitter followers, tweets out that they're going to be in your ad. It gives you a buzz. But
sure,
I think there's so many stars now, and I guess that DraftKings or the Caddyshack would have been examples of a miss, in my opinion, where the stars don't relate to your brand at all. I felt like the Popcorners actually did a decent job with,
I like that one. Yeah,
Breaking Bad. I had all the right notes, but it was making a point that their product is like crack, I guess. It was like crystal meth. Where but all the notes were right in that one, so it worked. But some of them are just stars for the sake of stars.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I have to imagine, like, it's not like one ad or one moment that's going to make or break a brand, but I imagine a win versus a loss, for however we define that in a Super Bowl spot, it's got to be worth a lot to a brand, whether it's raw dollars and cents or just recognition, things like that. I mean, do we have a sense of like how much this impacts those who are perceived as being the winners in this case?
Well, yeah, I think some of that is subjective, and I know direct marketing people, the Super Bowl just makes them insane because they, it's $7 million one time, big punch, home run swing, and they'd rather nibble you to death by by incremental amounts. But I do think that certainly Apple's 1984 with shot by Ridley Scott put Apple on the map in a way that it hadn't been. It was head to head with with PCs at that point, and it just launched them ahead. E-Trade with their famous baby spot, which I think is one of all-time favorites. I thought their spot was a bit of a miss this year. It just wasn't wasn't as sort of off the cuff, casual, entertaining as that original baby that spit up during his
Right. Right.
there was a lot of fun there. But I think, yeah, I think, from the original, I think Dick Butkus did the first star turn for Presto and Antifreeze because he filled holes really well. That's way back in like Super Bowl 14 or whatever. But today the star thing is too much, I think, for a lot of brands.
Yeah. A couple more things for Chris Preston. Really enjoying this conversation. Chris, as we think about this year's, maybe even just trends from recent years, are there things aside from, star performances, things like that, are there things that are trends that you see kind of carried through a lot of this year's spots, things that, whether it's distribution, whether it's the ads themselves that you say, yeah, this is kind of the direction that the creative turns are going, or how these things are being made right now?
Yeah, I think there's a background of content now, and it makes me crazy when creative ideas and is called content because it seems to be a diminishment of it in a lot of years. But a lot of the spots you saw and a lot of the spots you've seen over the last few years have been longer format films that have been cut down to 30. And if you look online at some of them, like the Caddyshack, even spot for Michelob, made a lot more sense when you saw the 2-minute version versus them trimming it to 30, where it just felt like you were being sort of shouted at and a bunch of random scenes. But I feel like that concept of engagement is really what it's all about now, trying to get people to engage beyond the Super Bowl. And I think, the Coinbase spot last year was an example of that, with just the floating QR code, floated around for 30 seconds. And it broke the internet. They got so many people scanned it because they wanted to know what the heck it was. However, the brand, I can't even remember the brand that did it this year, trying to get you to go to. Do you remember the name of that one?
I don't, and that's a good point, because sometimes an ad is seems like it's successful because you remember it, but what if you don't remember the brand?
Exactly, and that happens way too much. I think even if you do something amazing, if the emotion gets in the way of the message, you can lose as well. That's why the farmer's dog stuck in my head. It's just odd name, odd brand. The Amazon spot. I don't know if you were touched by the Amazon dog spot as much.
Yeah,
but it was a disappointment. I mean, I'm sure it was disappointing to both brands that both had a touching dog spot there. But for me, the farmer's dog was much more relevant to what they were selling, and also more emotional. And so it worked better.
Chris, final thought. Chris Preston, partner and chief creative officer at Preston Spire. That's a Minneapolis-based ad agency. Really enjoying this conversation. Final thought. I mean, as we think about the future, I guess maybe the past informs the future a lot of times, and especially as we think about it in retrospect. But how do you imagine these trends kind of evolving or continuing as we go forward? Are these kind of 30-second spots still going to be that important in a kind of increasingly kind of segmented, pocketed kind of world of advertising? Or how do you see Super Bowl advertising 5-10 years in the future?
That's a great question, Michael. And I think storytelling has been around for centuries. I think it's how we learn. I think it's how we remember. I think there will be a lot more as technology evolves, as artificial intelligence comes in and can tell exactly what makes a person tick and respond. There will be attempts to use AI and I think very effective ways. I suspect it'll be effective for a while, but getting back to the storytelling, I think that's still going to be the most relevant, the most interesting, the most entertaining. A little bit of the turns, the unexpectedness is still, the freshness, the zigging when others zag is going to continue to be important. But I do think storytelling will, I think it's going to come back in a bigger way, a trend. Maybe that's wishful thinking on a writer's part.
No, I like to think the same thing, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think the human truths, are still going to be, critical, and I think there will be a little bit of, pushback against this AI and against the sort of digital experience for the sake of a digital experience, as opposed to being in the moment, being invited to the party, being a welcome idea. As I said, our agency, Preston Spire, believes in that, and we, having that element as part of your brand voice is very, very important.
Well, absolutely it is, and I like all those things you just said, and we'll see where the future of all this is headed. It's very interesting to think about right now, but the future never happens suddenly. It usually kind of evolves over time, so maybe we've already experienced some of these things along the way. But Chris, I really enjoyed this conversation, the chance to kind of catch up on what we watched Sunday, outside of the game, and how that kind of matters to brands and where we might be going with that for the future as well. So appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, Chris Preston, and I hope we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Michael. It was great to meet you and to chat with you.
Good stuff from Chris. And one postscript to that, I had a direct message from Jake after I'd already conducted that interview saying, hey, tomorrow when you're talking about the Super Bowl ads and halftime, please address who are they trying to reach. It seems that the people they're trying to reach cannot afford to go to major sports games. That's interesting. I think advertising has changed to a certain degree. It's trying to glamorize things a little bit. I think advertising always has been, though, that a little bit of that kind of you treating you like maybe you can be more than you are, putting you in a spot where you're imagining a different version of yourself. So I don't know if it's changed all that much, but maybe the target market is changing a little bit. And if Jake feels that, I'm curious if some people out there are also feeling that as well. Let's finish with a quick thought about in the cooler here. I don't know why I was thinking about this the other day. Maybe I was watching the Wolves game, thinking about some things that have transpired, and maybe watching the Super Bowl brought this to mind as well. But let's go back to 2020 when the Vikings drafted Justin Jefferson and the Timberwolves drafted Anthony Edwards. Vikings could have gone a lot of different directions in that draft. Imagine if they had not taken Justin Jefferson in that draft. Imagine if the Philadelphia Eagles, instead of picking Jalen Reagor, had picked Justin Jefferson. Both had a wide receiver need. Imagine where the Vikings would be right now without Justin Jefferson. And sometimes we lament the picks that didn't get made. I want to honor the pick that did get made. Justin Jefferson, absolutely a franchise-changing player. Hard to imagine the Vikings without him. Same with Anthony Edwards. The Vikings were in a different position. They had the number one pick that year. But again, when you have anybody you can pick from, you've got a lot of options. Number 2 pick that year was James Wiseman for the Warriors, who just got traded basically just to dump his contract, to dump him from the team because he wasn't playing. Like, that's how these things can go. If you don't make the right pick, things can go completely off kilter for your franchise. So the Wolves, Gerson Rosas, the president at the time, deserve credit for making that Anthony Edwards pick, for changing the trajectory of this franchise. Because can you imagine the Wolves if they had taken Wiseman instead of Anthony Edwards? I certainly cannot, except to imagine that it would be a lot like the sad, sad years that had preceded this for the Wolves. And that'll do it for today. Should be a lot of baseball talk on Wednesday's show with Phil Miller. Stay dry, everybody. It's going to be a wet one out there today. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Back at it again on Wednesday.